program to bring you
Nick Whoa, Cage!
All right, everybody. My name is Kevin.
And I'm John.
And I'm Adam.
And I'm Julie.
And we are the Real Movie Guys. Mr. Referee, ring the bell, lock the cage. It's time for a real cage match. Real Cage Match is a special review series where your Real Movie Guys review 12 films from the legendary actor Nicolas Cage and have them go one-on-one in a tournament-style battle to determine which one truly is the cagiest of them all. On today's episode, we're taking a look at Mandy. The enchanted lives of a couple in the secluded forest are brutally shattered by a nightmarish hippie cult and their demon biker henchmen, propelling a man into a spiraling, surreal rampage of vengeance. All right, guys, so now we're in the latter stages of Nicolas Cage's career, which, for me personally, I feel like has been the most interesting journey out of all his movies. And I think we'll talk more about it when we get to the actual battle video, when we talk, about Mandy and Colorado Space together. But Mandy's an interesting movie just for the fact that in 2018, I don't think anybody expected Nicolas Cage to come out with this movie. And I have to tell you, after finally, I heard a lot of hubbub about this movie, and after finally watching it, I kind of get it. This movie kind of brought Nicolas Cage back into the forefront of being that character actor that so many of us know, and I think enhanced it times 11. And this movie does a lot of good things. I don't think it's for everybody, which is probably going to be the primary discussion that we're going to have. But overall, I kind of get why Mandy was so popular. John, let me start with you, man. What did you think of this movie overall?
Overall, I thought it was a very interesting movie. It was one of those movies that I felt like you could watch it back to back, like twice,
right,
and still not get everything from it. But I felt like it was definitely an interesting movie, to say the least, for it.
Yeah, I think multiple watches might be like a must-have for this movie. I can't imagine just watching this movie and getting everything. It took me even like a second, half through watch to get some of the actual plot down as to what was happening. This is a very show and not tell movie, which I think we're going to talk a lot about that too. Adam, what's up? What'd you think?
I knew nothing about this movie going into it.
Right.
I went in totally blind, and what a wild ride this was. I just not expecting what I watched at all.
Right. And what do you think of not knowing what you were getting yourself into? Do you think that was a good thing or a bad thing when it came to this movie?
With this movie, I think it was a good thing.
Okay.
I think it was.
Okay. Very interesting. All right. And Julie, how about you? What'd you think overall?
Overall, was pleasantly surprised. I think this movie, I'd have to look chronologically when a lot of these more recent videos we've been doing have been coming out. But I will say, we are in the Renaissance era of Nick Cage. And I knew nothing about this movie as well. And it was batshit crazy in a good way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the beginning left a little bit to be desired. I know after you and I'm sure we'll get into it, after we talked about it in retrospect, I get why it was the way it was. But it took me a while to get into this movie. But once I was in for the ride.
Right. And I think what this movie ultimately is, there's a few things about it, right? So the main thing, I don't know if a casual audience is going to enjoy this movie. And this isn't me just trying to be like a snob, shoving my nose up in there and being like, oh, the filthy, dirty casuals won't understand it. No, I don't think that's what it is. I just don't think this is the kind of movie that is for everybody. It's very... The best way to describe this right away, it's pretty much a heavy metal love letter on a psychedelic acid trip. I guess that's maybe the best way to kind of put this. And there's not really a lot of dialogue in the movie. And if there is dialogue, I don't even know how much it really matters because this is a very visual movie. And I think, number one, that's the thing I think I really did appreciate about this movie. And if anything, it proves once again how good of an actor Nick Cage really is. He doesn't really have too much dialogue in this movie. He does have a couple scenes where he does interact with people and stuff like that. But most of the movie is him just from the director pointing the camera at him with very long takes of almost seeming like nothing. It seems like there's nothing going on, especially when they do focus on Nicolas Cage, who plays Red, and Andrea Riseborough, I think her name is, who plays Mandy, who's his wife in the movie. a lot of the early movie, which is probably the biggest detriment to this movie overall, is how slow it is in the beginning. It takes quite a while to get going. But once it really kicks into overdrive, this is a fantastic movie. But the argument to get there, I think there's a discussion there. Adam, what did you think of the visual storytelling? Did you think it was successful? Or because, again, I think it was just really slow in the beginning, at least.
Yeah, it definitely took a slow start getting to where it actually found its footing, I feel. Visually, I think a lot of it did land. A lot of it was like, I don't know. I didn't really see any. Maybe it was because I need to rewatch it.
Right.
That may be the case, but I don't know. Overall, I think it did pretty well.
Would you say this was pretentious in any way? Because I could see someone making that argument a little bit. Like, I wonder if it was a little too artsy just to be artsy at times, when they could have just gone with a more straightforward, just kind of tell me what the plot is to get it moving.
I'll give you that. Yeah, I'll say that. I agree with that.
Yeah, because again, I think that the scenes are interesting, right? Again, a lot of the scenes with Red and Mandy are interesting because you need that solid foundation for what's to happen later in the movie. You have to understand them as a couple and see why they work so well together. Did that translate though at times? Sometimes I don't know, because again, sometimes it just felt like nothing was happening. And I understand the point of all of that, where it was supposed to make them feel just like an ordinary couple living an ordinary life until suddenly a crazy cult comes and upheaves their whole lives, and it's just insanity after that. How about you, Johnny? I know as someone I know you're not too fond of the artsy kind of style of films. What did you think of that kind of approach that they took? Did you actually like that, or did you find it kind of boring?
I felt like pretty much like Adam felt. I felt that it was really slow in the beginning, but I also felt like I kind of enjoyed the way they did it too, because it was different. And sometimes, like, I feel like a different take on like art styles is kind of cool in movies instead of seeing the same old thing. But like you were saying too, like with Nicolas Cage's acting, this is another movie where he doesn't have to say much, but just his acting skills show through.
Right, and there's quite a few scenes, I think, where he does just bring that intensity, again, especially towards the end, which I promise we'll talk about the end, but we got to get some of this stuff out of the way before we get to that, at least the middle. But again, early on, I think is really just the weakest portion of this film. But again, I won't argue with it. Stylistically, I think it is a fantastic looking movie. The cinematography is always on point. Also, another like really big surprise for me was the cult leader played by Linus Roach, who is, I believe he's like Rob Zombie alumni. I think he was in one of a more recent Rob Zombie movie. I can't remember. Was it like 31 or something like that? I forget the name of it. But he plays Jeremiah Sand, who's this crazy cult leader. And you know what? He was a pretty good antagonist. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't know what he was saying half the time. I think a lot of it was supposed to be commentary on just like what is a cult exactly, because they didn't have like one belief. There was like at least 3 or 4 different beliefs, but ultimately it just kind of seems like it came down to the world didn't like my music, so I became a cult leader. That ultimately seems like what it is, I guess kind of throwing back to the the Manson days and stuff like that. Again, interesting, I like his performance. I thought he was really cool. Again, some of the scenes with him were just standout. One of my favorite scenes in the whole movie actually was with him and Mandy. The cult ends up, I guess he falls in love with Mandy and wants to have this attraction to her, so he has his cult kidnap her and bring him to her. And in order to like seduce her, he brings her into this room, and he gives this really long, like one take ultimately monologue, and it shows his face and her face kind of like blending back and forth as he's talking to her. And I thought that was just, is that what an acid trip is? Because I mean, I haven't been on one personally, so I can't really tell you. But if I were to imagine what it was, I think it would be that scene in particular. It was just a really cool way of filmmaking. Julie, I know you were impressed with that too. And you were just like, what the hell's going on, as much as I was when we were watching that.
Yeah, and I think that just heightened his performance because, as Mandy is having this drug trip, his voice is so distorted and it takes these different pitches while he's doing this monologue. And it's so hypnotic, which again, at the end of the day, he's just speaking gibberish, his own, agenda, his own belief, but it's making you feel compelled, like, I guess, like his followers would be, just with the delivery. That along with the lighting, it had that magenta kind of coloring to the room, and then the other visuals, like you mentioned, their faces blending together. It was just a very interesting scene overall, very compelling.
Now, what did you guys think of the light style? Adam, did you actually like the filter idea that they were using? Because to me personally, I get why they did it. It added like its whole like sense of lighting and kind of style to the whole movie. But I don't know, it felt kind of off to me at times. Like it was a little too much. Did you get that kind of vibe from it at any time?
It felt like they were trying to give a callback to like an 80s-esque film style.
Yeah, that grindhousey kind of film.
Yeah,
for sure.
like especially with like the opening title card too. I think with the I was like, oh, okay, I immediately kind of got what they were going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Some
think
parts
so.
I didn't necessarily need, but I think it overall, I think it set the tone well for the movie enough.
Yeah, I think it's, again, this movie, if we're going to say anything about it, it's very much just a visual expression. Like the story itself, I don't think even really matters that much because it's a very like basic story from beginning to end. What the director is really trying to do here, and I know he's done this before. He has like one other movie, which when I was kind of researching this movie, it was like the surfing and the Black Rainbow or something like that, and it was very much similar to this. A lot of people were saying this was kind of like the unofficial sequel to that movie as far as his directing style, and I think there's a place for that, and I think it's interesting that we can even have a conversation about this kind of movie because ultimately, like you said, he's using lighting, color, and the music, everything intertwined together to just give you this, expression of a movie, which I think is interesting. So let's go a little bit forward here because now I think we want to talk about the part that's the most interesting. John, did you expect this to be a revenge movie midway through the movie? And essentially we have Nicolas Cage becoming John Wick almost towards the middle of this movie?
No, I did not expect that at all. It was very like shocking to me.
Right.
And like this whole movie just kind of had that like weird sense to it throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I think so. It's very much a shock factor. Now, Adam, as someone who also didn't have any idea what to expect, were you shocked by the sudden murder of Mandy? And then that's when this movie really kicks up for me, and I know it probably did for you as well, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, once it happened, I was like, "Oh, this is okay. Now I'm in. Because it really kicked off there, and it was great.
Right, and then the violence is very over the top and just insane, and just from beginning to end. As someone who, I hate to say I'm a fan of violence, but it's kind of true. I do enjoy a good like murder horror-esque take, and Nicolas Cage was really comfortable. A little too comfortable in this setting, I would even argue, to the point where his visual, like just his manifestation of his emotions, making that awesome axe and going after people. Like if you really want like a heavy metal vibe to be even more cemented, you give a warrior his axe, man. He's going in there, he's chopping stuff, chopping guys' heads off, lighting a cigarette with it. I thought this was just crazy, and that's where this movie, I don't know. What do you guys think overall? Do you think if the beginning was slow enough, do you think this latter half of the movie will lose people with how like insane it is, considering we have superhuman meth heads fighting people? Like that's kind of what they are. And it's insane. It's such a weird movie to have to discuss with people. What do you guys think overall? Did anyone really think about that?
I think the way that I'm perceiving the movie is now I have to take a step back and look at it as a whole.
Right.
Like this is like the setup into the giant crescendo that is the second half of the movie.
Okay.
And I think the build up there is definitely worth the wait.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. I would wonder if they paced it a little differently, because what happens is ultimately Nick Cage, once Mandy dies, he decides he's going to go back and revenge. We find out he had I guess he did have some form of a shady past. They don't really go into it. He was definitely military, some form of military background. And he goes after the people that killed his wife. And it's interesting because he starts off with the hardest. If you were looking at this from like a video game perspective, he kind of started off with like the main boss fights first. And then he went to go like fight like the underlings. Anyone else get that felt that was kind of like a weird organizational vibe that they were going for in this movie?
Yeah, I thought that was weird. I mean, if anything, I guess it was smarter on his part to take out your biggest adversaries and then kind of take out the weakling cult followers and leader. But there's a lot of suspension of, because even just those meth head biker. It wasn't even meth. It was it LSD, bad
Yeah.
batch of LSD.
Yeah, they were purposely given bad batches of LSD to make them crazy.
It's like revenge, but then they ended up loving
Right.
it and would like chug the stuff, which is insane. I mean, the action was insane and really cool with them. But yeah, like you said, that power hierarchy was kind of bizarre.
Yeah, I just thought it was, but those fight scenes were all awesome. Like him going after all these like leather clad, like monster looking men with like weird fetishes and crazy drug attached. It was cool. It was a cool scene. I don't know really what else to say. It was just fun watching Nicolas Cage have to go after them kind of one by one in that house and take them all down till eventually he does get to the end of the movie where he, confronts the cult leaders. But I think this movie, again, like I kind of keep saying, it embodies a lot of what makes like that grindhouse B movie kind of movie extremely successful. I just think it does try at some points to try and elevate it with its art style. But again, getting Nicolas Cage, I could see why he took on this role. We're starting to see kind of more of like who Nicolas Cage is as an actor. At least I am through like the movies that we've been watching. Anytime he takes a piece, whether it's, Ghost Rider or Moonstruck or whatever the case may be, he wants to play a character who's different and something maybe he hasn't necessarily explored before. And Mandy's, Red is that character. He's someone he hasn't really explored before. And I think that's going to tie into our next point where we're going to nominate and give you our Real Cagiest Moment Award. Real Cagiest Moment Award is a special award we grant to the real cagiest moment of the film. There's only one scene in this movie. I mean, there's a lot of cagey scenes. There's the whole, like, you ripped my favorite t-shirt, and then he starts going after the guys and killing everybody, which I think that's fantastic. I'd probably, feel kind of the same way. Someone ripped my favorite t-shirt.
I love that scene.
It was crazy. It was batshit crazy. Again, like I mentioned earlier, him lighting a cigarette on a severed guy's head. Only Nick Cage could really pull that off with such a cool factor. But the real reason I'm nominating this one scene is because I think it embodies, if it was in any other movie, I think we would have like a perfect 10 movie conversation here if it was in any other movie but this one. But the fact that it's in this movie, there's some things that don't really work for it to be that perfect score. But after Mandy's killed, we see this very long take of Nicolas Cage in a bathroom with a bottle of alcohol. It's a perfect scene. I don't know what else to tell you. If you're looking for a piece of acting right there, it's absolutely perfect. You see Nick Cage kind of relapse. He goes into the sink, grabs a bottle of alcohol and starts chugging it. He's pouring it on his wounds as he's screaming and crying, and he's going back and forth. And he's just yelling, sitting on the toilet, standing up, crying to laughing to, I don't know. John, what did you think of that scene? Because to me, that was like the pinnacle of success for this movie.
Oh yeah, definitely the best scene in this whole movie. I felt like you could also feel the emotion throughout that scene, which I think really brought it almost home and together, this movie.
Yeah, I think it really tied together for me the next chapter of the movie. Kind of like Adam said, like we had this whole setup for the movie, and maybe I wasn't feeling everything necessarily up until that point, but once we got to that scene and I saw Nicolas Cage kind of just like let out this guttural emotion of like everything that's come up to this point, I kind of understood his quest for revenge for the rest of the movie. Like it kind of sold those like more quiet moments to me because they kind of felt even a little more relatable. Like this guy, he's just a normal guy, and now the one thing he loves more than anything else has been taken from him. Now he's got to go on a quest to get it back. And if you want an epic middle horror story, I think this is it. The one other moment I think a lot of people would talk about is the end of this movie too. Adam, what did you think of the final confrontation? Well, before even the confrontation, we did get a chainsaw battle. I don't know if anyone else was very impressed with that. That blew me away too, I have to tell you.
I enjoyed the bigger chainsaw that came
bigger
out.
Chainsaw. I didn't expect that. I thought it was just going to be a little chainsaw fight or whatever, and then the one guy pulls out the bigger chainsaw. I'm like, okay, I see what's going on here. That was unexpected.
They weren't satisfied with two equally sized chainsaws. It had to, because that wouldn't be cool on its own. You had to have a giant chainsaw versus your average chainsaw.
No, it's not metal enough. We need something a lot more metal, so we got to have another chainsaw. But once we get over that fight, which I think the ending to that fight is horrifically brutal. He doesn't even like kill him with the actual. He kills him with the chainsaw, but he drags him on like Ghost Rider style with a chain. See how we tied that back there, pretty good. Ripped him onto it, pulled him onto the chain, and the one guy gets chopped up in the chainsaw. Oh, that was just brutal.
I liked it showed him using his like brain. He's like, all right, I'm not winning this fight with my chainsaw. Like I have to be creative here and improvise, and it worked out gruesomely.
Right, and then we get to the final confrontation, which again I think is just, I think it was like just batshit insane. That might be another like real insane moment for Nicolas Cage there, where he pretty much tells the cult leader, Jeremiah, as he has him like in his hands and he's like holding his head, and he tells him like, "I am God," and then he just like crushes his head and his eyeball pops out, and it's like this horrific scene. And then we see Nick Cage drive off in his car. Is he the good guy? Is he the bad guy? It's hard to say from certain perspectives, because he's driving off and it's like this heavy metal like scene in the background where you got like the spiked mountains and like the cool artwork and stuff like that. It's one of those interesting theories, and I saw it kind of spinning around a little bit, that from a certain perspective, Nicolas Cage might have just been kind of turning into another one of those crazy people himself after this whole revenge plot of him going out and killing for Mandy. I think there is a discussion for that, for sure. I mean, he did just murder a ton of people and kind of drove off like barely an inconvenience. But I don't know. I thought it was a fun movie, at least that way.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of poses the question, like, all right, you went on this, not adventure, but you went on this mission and it's accomplished now, but you're still without Mandy. Where do you go from here?
Right, and I like again, we were talking about the visual storytelling where he's sitting in the car and he's looking back and forth. He looks ahead, then he looks to his side, he sees Mandy, like the first time he met Mandy, and then he looks ahead and it's like all crazy and all fucked up. He's got blood all over his face and he's like doing the crazy laugh and stuff like that. And she's still sitting there, but then he turns his head and then she's gone. What did you think of the ending, Adam? It was kind of like ambiguous that way, which I kind of like that sometimes. I like when a director feels comfortable to do that.
Yeah, it's fun kind of seeing those like make your own ideas and kind of come up with however you think it should end, or maybe they left it open enough because all of a sudden Nicolas Cage is going to do a sequel for all of these movies coming up.
Yeah,
like,
right. It wouldn't surprise me, right? Some kind of like big massive tie-in or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed it though. I think it was good to. It was a nice sort of descent into madness type thing, if you will.
Right. No, I can agree with that.
It tied the movie in, all together again.
It did. It did definitely, for sure. And then, John, so what did you think of the end? Did you like the way the movie kind of ended, how it wrapped up things? Or would you watch a Mandy too? I don't even know how you would even do a second one if you were to do this movie, but is that something you'd consider?
I don't think I'd watch a Mandy too, but I thought they ended it pretty well.
Yeah. No, I think
a decent
so.
Ending.
Yeah, it's just nice to see Nicolas Cage do something crazy. And I think we'll have more conversation about that when we talk about another movie on this list and something else actually a little bit down the line we'll talk about. But overall, I think we're ready to give our final scores. I'm going to give Mandy a 7.5 out of 10. This is a good movie. I think it's definitely above average. I think the visual storytelling is really what sells this for me. I think between the cinematography, I think the sound design, the color palette, just all that, and Nicolas Cage's performance is just like icing on the cake for this movie. It's very slow in the beginning. I think that's something maybe you should be aware of. Like kind of like Adam said, like it was fun not going and not knowing what this is about, but maybe like a little heads up, like, hey, it's gonna take a little bit to get going. Sometimes we'll keep you invested to get to the good stuff in this movie. Not to say that the beginning's not good. I just think it's slow, and it definitely feels that way at times, which I think is the biggest hindrance. But like I said earlier, Nick Cage gives maybe a 10 out of 10 performance as far as that one scene in this movie. And once it kicks off from there, he's at an 11 the rest of the movie. And that's the Nick Cage I like to see. It's a fun time. I think most people will have a good time with Mandy. Just be aware it's not for everyone. So if you are turned off by it, probably shouldn't feel ashamed. I could kind of see why. John, how about you? What do you think of this movie?
I give this movie a 7. I feel like it had really good parts. It had some down parts. But overall, I felt like it was a decent movie. It's definitely one of those movies that I don't know if I would watch definitely again, but I'd be curious to watch it a second time, just to maybe catch on to more of the different things that maybe I didn't catch on to the first time.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory to talk about too. Like, would you watch this movie again? I mean, I did kind of start watching it the second time. I actually didn't finish it the second time I started it, but I did enjoy it. And, you know, I think even maybe knowing what I was getting myself into, I think I was maybe a little more intrigued about rewatching it and seeing what I missed and putting some of those pieces together. Is it a casual viewing? I'm not too sure about that, but I think it is a fun time. Adam, how about you? What do you think?
All right, I'm going to give Mandy a 7.5 as well.
You're in my shirt! You're in my shirt!
I thought it was a decent movie. I think that Nicolas Cage really was a very good actor in the movie. I think that all of the scenes were very well done. I like the action, but it really does suffer with that beginning half of the movie. It just kind of takes a real long slog to get through, you know, the actual good part.
Right, and we always make the argument, you know, art over substance, and you know, we love art, right. But we kind of need substance in order for the art to land. So I could definitely see that being a turnoff for a lot of people, you know.
Yeah.
But, okay, well, that's cool to see we're on the same page. Julie, how about you? What do you think?
I am going to be giving Mandy a 7 out of 10. The beginning of the movie really was just kind of a blow for the movie overall for me. I mean, it doesn't take much because it happens all the time, even for things I do like, but I was dozing and fighting consciousness during that first half hour. However, the latter half of the movie was so cool, so insane, but also had Nick Cage delivering a pretty solid performance, a pretty good piece of acting on his part, as well as, you know, the antagonist cult leader, Jeremiah. I would probably watch this again, but you definitely have to be in the mood for it.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that, like, I remember people talking about this movie saying it was kind of like the reemergence of Nick Cage's career. There was an interview he did in 2018 when this movie came out. This was actually around, he was married to Alice Kim Cage, who was one of his former wives. He's got a couple at this point, but he was with her for 14 years. And I remember him saying, like, there was that time he got divorced from her, and he felt like a lot of those feelings somewhere got, like, lost in this performance. And I could see that, you know. I think he took maybe some of what he was dealing with, whether, you know, on that personal level, and kind of put it into this film where he was with someone for so long, and then it had a suddenly shocking end where they were never going to be together again. I mean, maybe not, you know, murdered, but at least divorced in some respect. You know how Hollywood is. If there's no time to go back, there's no time. But, you know, I think I could see him transferring that. And I think this is, again, evidence, and we're just going to keep adding it to that portfolio of why Nick Cage is such a great actor. Mandy's a fun time. It comes recommended by us. You know, pretty good overall score. I think you guys should check it out. But thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin. That's Adam, Julie, John. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. We'll catch you next time. If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys, you should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.